I'm going to show you exactly how to use your big stand mixer to make sourdough. This is how I make big batches. Now, disclaimer, you don't have to have a stand mixer in order to make a big batch of sourdough, but this is how I use the stand mixer to make it easier. So if you have one, this is the exact steps that I do. Plus, I'm gonna show you not just how to use your stand mixer, we're gonna go from waking up our sourdough, using our stand mixer to make the dough, making a loaf of sandwich bread, freezing a portion of the dough, and you get to walk through the whole process from starter to your bread being put into its nice, oh, this is all that's left of the loaf that I made. We get to go through the whole process together, so you don't have to go find another video. This video has all of it, from starter to slicing your bread. But here's why I love making the big batches of dough. The big batch that we make together in this video, I used to make a rustic loaf. I used to make pizza. I made a sandwich loaf, which this is all that's left of it. And look, there's a little bit of dough left. Let's dive in. I want you to learn all the tricks of making a big batch because you're gonna love baking if it doesn't take all of your time. I'm actually going to wake my starter up in the bowl, and this cuts out one more thing that has to be washed. So I have my bowl, my big mixer bowl. Now we have a big, huge stand mixer. I'm gonna bring you over here so you can see. It does fit on our counter, but it lives over here. Big stand mixer, and that's what we're gonna use today to actually wake up the sourdough starter, and then it'll be in there ready, and all I have to do is add in the ingredients for the dough. My scale is on, and I'm changing it so that it is 2 grams. Whoops, I went by. Grams. Now, if your scale right now reads any numbers, hit your tare button, because that's gonna cancel it out, and it basically takes away the weight of the bowl so that we're only seeing the weight of what we add into it. And I want to do a starter that is going to activate really fast. And so I'm gonna do a 1:1:1 ratio. And because I'm making a big batch, I am doing 200 grams of my starter, which it's a little bit liquidy because oops, went over a little bit. It's liquidy because it's been sitting in the fridge for a while and I haven't used it in a bit. And so I was just stirring the hooch back in. Yes, you can stir your hooch back in. It is part of your sourdough, and it's not gonna do anything bad to your sourdough starter. You actually need that hooch in there. It's part of the liquid. So you'll see, it's a little bit over. It's 202, not a problem. But I'm gonna tare it again, wipe that clean. Now I'm gonna do 200 grams of water. And this is from our faucet. We are on an aquifer, so it's very nice, clean water. It's warm so that, one moment, I can't talk and do the numbers at the same time. There we go. Okay, my water is warm because I want my starter to wake up a little bit faster. So that's another thing that you can do to get your starter to wake up faster is use warm water. Not hot, it's just warm. It feels like just warm to the touch. And I like to mix the water in with the starter so there's no clumps. And now I'm using all-purpose flour. Okay, next up, let's tare our scale. And we're gonna put in 200 grams of all-purpose flour, which is about 2 cups, cup and a half-ish. But I like to use the scale. It's just easier to know that I have the right amount in there. Okay, now I have my Danish dough whisk. This is my favorite tool to use with my sourdough. It is so much easier to mix up the dough or the starter. And I'm just gonna get it mixed really well. And you'll see we should have because we did 200 grams of each thing, we now have 600 grams. Now just remember, I'm making a big batch. If you don't want to make a big batch, all you have to do is cut this amount in fourths, and you would have the exact amount of starter you need to make one loaf. Our starter is all mixed up in the mixing bowl. So this is the great thing, is that the starter's in there. It's gonna rise. And then this evening while I'm making dinner, I am going to throw the ingredients in here for the dough. Start the stretch and fold process while we're making dinner, and it will be done and ready to go into the fridge this evening. And you know, here's the thing. It's a super busy week for us here. We have a bunch of events that we're prepping for, but I had a few minutes while I was eating lunch, and I thought, oh, I'm gonna wake up my starter so that I can make the dough tonight, so that this weekend when we're done with our events, we will be able to, actually it won't be Friday night, but we'll have pizza night together as a family, and the dough will be ready to go. I won't have to think about it on Sunday when we actually have time to sit down and enjoy this. So that's the perk of making big batches. So if you have space in your fridge, make a batch for like 2 or enough for 3 loaves of dough, and then you can make fresh bread whenever you want. So, okay, our starter is now gonna go into a warm spot. I'm actually gonna turn only the oven light on, and I'm gonna pop it in there so that it's in a nice warm spot to wake up that starter. And the rest of my sourdough starter goes right back in the fridge. And you can see, like, I just use a regular lid. Parker named our starter Nigel, and so it says Nigel on the top. It's just a regular lid. I screw it on just enough that the lid won't come off. It's not tight, but this is how it sits in the fridge all the time. And if I start getting low on starter in here, then I try to make a little extra when I make a batch of dough. But we have lots of extra right now, so back into the fridge it goes, and it stays and lives in there until I'm ready to make my next big batch of dough. But for now, our starter's gonna wake up and rise in our big bowl, and then we'll be back to make the bread, the dough a little bit later. Now that our starter has been resting and growing and rising, you can see that it is quite a bit thicker. And it's okay, you can stir it. It's ready for you to start baking with it. And we made 600 total grams of starter. This is enough starter for us to make 4 good size rustic loaves, or we'll use it to make focaccia and pizza and all of that goodness. So I'm adding in 1,200 grams of room temperature water. We have really great water straight from our tap, and so we just use it right from the sink. If you feel like your water has, I don't know, maybe like a slight chlorine taste or sulfur, use bottled water, but I just like to use like room temperature tap water. I use my dough whisk, mix that starter and water up so that it's ready for the flour to come in. And for this recipe, I'm doing 1,800 grams of all-purpose flour. If you are finding that your dough is too sticky, go ahead, add in some whole wheat flour or some bread flour. It will help to boost your dough so that it's not so sticky. Now, don't add your salt in yet. The very first thing that we do is we go over to our stand mixer with your dough hook, and you're going to mix the dough just until it comes together. Don't walk away from your mixer. Stand there and watch it. I'm showing you the whole thing. This is how long it takes. Not very long. And I basically go until I see that the flour is no longer like bunched up against the sides and the dough is just beginning to come together. Now, I have a really big KitchenAid. I think it's the 8 quart, and it can barely fit a batch of dough for 4 loaves. But there we go. That's enough. I just use my dough whisk to push down anything from the sides. It still looks
kind of lumpy and clumpy, that's good. We want to let the sourdough do its work. We don't want to try and force the sourdough into the dough, because that's when your bread can get sticky, gummy, and dense. Now, bring your scale back out, get a little bowl, and you're gonna measure out the salt. You're not gonna mix the salt in yet. We're just gonna measure out 40 grams. And this is the salt that I like to use. It's a pink Himalayan salt. It is fine, not as fine as table salt, but it's also not like coarse. So you can use whichever salt you want. Just know that each salt does have a little bit different saltiness. So if you make your dough with a different salt and you find, oh, it just didn't have quite enough flavor, use a little bit more of the salt that you have. Now what I do, the dough has just been slightly mixed up, and I just put the salt over the top. Just sprinkle it over, and it's gonna rest on there. You'll notice when you come back after this Autolyse stage, put your towel over your mixer. It's gonna sit there for at least 30 minutes. It could go 40 minutes, and that's fine. But you'll see when you come back that there's a little bit of like liquid that gathers around the salt, and that's totally normal. The salt actually draws liquid out of the dough, and this is why you don't want to mix the salt in straight away, because when you allow it to rest on the dough instead of being mixed in, you're allowing the flour to hydrate better. So now it's been 30 minutes and I come back and we're just going to do a couple mixes. I want the salt to get incorporated in. So I'm grabbing a tool so that I can like push it down in there. If yours is doing this too, push that salt down in there so that your mixer can get it incorporated in. I help the mixer slightly because we don't want the mixer to be running for a really long time. Because again, if you over mix this dough, it's gonna make your bread not turn out as fluffy and soft. It will be gummy and dense, and the dough will be hard to work with. So again, I just keep pushing it on down there. Have your little spatula with you. If you're not making a massive batch of dough like I am, yours isn't gonna be getting up there at the top of your mixer. So just remember, you don't have to make this big of a batch. I'm gonna put the ratios down in the description below. Just cut them in fourths if you only wanna make one batch of dough. So I let it rest for another 30 minutes. Then I come back, I turn my mixer on for like five swipes around the bowl, cover it back up, let it do another rest, and you can see that the dough is starting to come together. Look at how much softer it is. That's not from us mixing it, that's from the sourdough beginning to work through the dough. Another stretch and fold, and this is the last one. You're gonna do those stretch and folds 3 times, and you can see it's getting dark. We had dinner, I cleaned it up, and all throughout our evening, I just pop back in when the timer goes off, run the mixer for just a few swipes around the bowl, and then I go back to whatever it is I'm doing. So now we're at our final stretch and fold, and look at how easily I can pull the dough hook out. This is what your dough should feel like. If at this point it is very, very sticky and you can't work with it, get some more flour in there, because as it rests in the fridge, it naturally gets a little stickier because your fridge has some humidity in it. The water is starting to separate slightly from the dough. So if you can't work with your dough right now, I want you to go back, add some more flour in, and then put it into your container. And you can see this is a big batch of dough. It's hard to get it out. It's very heavy, but it fills, not all the way, it fills my 6-quart food storage bin, usually up to about the 4-quart mark, which is good. You want there to be extra space, because guess what? As the sourdough works its way through this dough, the dough is actually gonna start fluffing up and rising as it's in your fridge. So lots of you have asked the question, how come you don't leave it out on the counter for proofing and fermenting and all of that? I don't do that part. I get to the very last stretch and fold, I put it into the storage bin, and it goes into the fridge. And it rests in there until I want to bake. But if it was earlier in the day, and let's say I wanted some focaccia bread to have with our dinner, you can make some bread with this dough right now if you want to. It's ready for you to bake with. But I'm not going to bake today. Into the fridge it goes, and it gets to stay in there. It's going to just rest, and it's going to proof. It's going to bubble up. So make sure that your container has some space in it for your dough to rise, because it's going to rise in there. Now let's get all of our tools cleaned up. I wash everything in our kitchen sink. I don't ever pour discard or big chunks of sourdough down the drain. But just like I would wash the bowls and the utensils if I made cookies or cake or even a yeasted type of dough, it's okay to wash your utensils in your sink. Just be mindful that you're not pouring discard or pouring large amounts down your drain. Instead, I'm washing, everything's getting diluted so much as I wash. And yes, it's evening, it's dark. It took the evening to make the dough, but this is the only day I'm spending on it for the next 2 weeks. And here's the dough the next morning. See how it's firm, but it's not sticky. Like, I can push it around, and it's very pliable. It's ready. I could bake with it if I wanted to, but I don't have time today, so back into the fridge. It's gonna stay in there. Okay, this is day 2. Look at how many bubbles it's starting to get. It's starting to puff up and fluff up even more. Now, let's make a loaf of sandwich bread together. I honestly think this is the best type of bread to start with, besides focaccia, because focaccia doesn't take any shaping, and so I really think it is the absolute easiest. But if you're wanting to make a loaf of bread, start with a sandwich loaf. You don't have to use a cast iron pan, but I'm putting the link to this below in case you want to get one. I just really love baking with it. I like the way that it bakes the crust. But I also use our regular metal pans. The glass pans work. You can use any loaf pan that you have. Just make sure that you oil it well so that the bread will easily come out of it. So this is the first chunk of dough that I'm taking out of the bin. And what I do is I set the bin on the scale, and we're gonna work backwards. I use my knife to cut it so that I'm not having to rip and push so much air out of it. But my goal right now is to pull out 800 grams. That's how much I need in order to make a sandwich loaf. And look at the dough in the bin. Do you see how much air bubbles is in there? That is such a good sign that your sourdough starter is happy and active, and it's working its way through the dough. So just keep pulling out little chunks. It's okay to rip off little bits of it until the scale reads negative 800 grams. Then you don't have to weigh the dough. You can just pull it straight out of the bin, and you'll be going into the negative numbers. And look at all this beautiful, stretchy, fluffy dough. Back into the fridge it's gonna go, because we're gonna bake other stuff with that dough. But right now, let's shape our sandwich bread. I always have a little bowl of water next to me. Instead of using flour, we actually want to use water, because at this point, unless your dough is just completely so sticky you can't work with it, I suggest that you use the water, because then you're not adding in any new flour that hasn't had a chance to be worked on by the sourdough. And this is why I love the sandwich loaves, because you're just rolling the dough until it is the shape that you want. And usually it takes 4 passes. And I wish you could see or feel how much I'm squeezing it. You need to squeeze the life out of your dough. I'm not joking. Squeeze the dickens out of it. It's so crazy. I know it makes no sense when you think about yeasted dough. You don't want to push all of the air out of it. But with sourdough, if you don't create that tension, the sourdough has nothing to push against and you don't get very good rise, and your bread will also be very dense. So squeeze, squeeze, squeeze. Then I dust it with a little bit of flour, put parchment paper over it, and this is gonna rest on the counter for an hour before I bake it. Or you could get it ready in your loaf pan and you could pop it in your fridge and it would just wait in your fridge for you. If you pop it into your fridge, it needs to be in there for at least 2 hours before you bake it, but it could be in there for a couple days and then you're gonna bake it straight from the fridge, cold from the fridge. But while our dough is resting in the pan, I decided I wasn't gonna have time to use all of the dough from the big bin this week, and so I'm gonna freeze some of it. So I'm doing the same process where I set the bin on the scale. I'm gonna tear the scale out so it cancels that weight out. And I wrote on my bag how much I'm putting in there so that I know, oh, I can either make a loaf of sandwich bread or I could make a couple pizzas, or I could make focaccia. Yes, you can use this dough for pizza. I don't think it has the same texture as our actual pizza dough, but it is really good. It makes delicious pizza all the same. So I cut out the amount that I need and I'm putting it into my storage bag. Make sure you write on it because otherwise you'll look at the bag and think, wait, what did I put in there? How much is in there? And I have a whole nother video on how to use the frozen dough to make pizza, and so I will link that below. But what I like to do whenever I pull some dough out of the container is I just kind of work my way around the container and I push any little bits of the dough back down so that they're not getting dried out on the side of the container. But you can see this dough has been sitting in the fridge for over a week, and look, it's still completely workable. Lots of bubbles in it, great tension. And so now we have a loaf of sandwich bread getting ready to be baked. We have some dough that's gonna go into the freezer so that we could bake later. And we still have more dough in the fridge. And all of that is just from one day of having to mess around with the starter and mix up the bread dough. So this is why making a bigger batch is so, so helpful. You will be able to have fresh bread whenever you want, instead of being so bound to needing to feed your starter each day and get a new loaf of bread going. And so this is why it's one of my favorite ways to make sourdough. Now that our dough has been resting in the pan for an hour on the counter, it's time to bake it. So make sure that you do a good cut on it, because giving it that cut allows the bread to actually rise better. So you'll see it's a little bit sticky, but just work your way through and make sure you give it a good cut. Then we're going to bake at 425. And do you see down in the bottom of my oven, I have a baking pan and there's water in that. That water in the pan allows the bread to bake and have a soft crust even though there's no lid on my loaf pan. So we're gonna come and check it at 35 minutes. Here's what it looks like after 35 minutes of baking. It's looking beautiful, but it's not done yet. It usually will take somewhere between 45 to 55 minutes to get to the point that my thermometer will read 200 degrees. And that's what you want your sandwich loaf to come out at. Use a meat thermometer, stick it right into the middle of the bread and make sure that it's reading close to 200 degrees. It could be like 195, it could be 205, but you want it to be right at that point. If yours won't shake out of the pan, don't worry. Go and get, like I have this little frosting knife that's flexible. So I just work it around the pan. Sometimes one little bit has gotten stuck. And so I just wiggle it around the pan because you don't want to rip the bottom of your dough off or your bread. So don't be too hasty. Work your way around so that it will come out easier. And I have a longer video all about the sandwich loaf and how to make it. I'm going to put that link in the description. So if you want even more details, you can go and watch that. But look at how beautiful it turned out. Now, don't cut it yet. It needs to cool. Cooling is important for the sourdough bread. It allows you to get the best texture. If you cut into it too early and it hasn't cooled, your bread will have a tendency to be a little bit gummy. But look at this. Even though there was no lid on that pan, the crust is very soft, and look at the inside. It's nice and small little bubbles in it. And that's how we like it for our sandwich bread, because I want to be able to put mustard and mayonnaise and add things onto the sandwich, and I don't want all of that goodness like coming out through a big hole. And now we're going to store the sourdough, and I love to put it in our muslin bread bags. My mother-in-law made it for me. Someday soon we'll be able to show you how to make them. And I put links below to all of our favorite tools, this bread knife included. It is so awesome. It makes it possible to cut really nice thin slices.
And that's how we do it. One big loaf of sourdough turns into so much goodness at our table, so many fun memories together, and honestly, on the busy weeks, and even if the weeks aren't busy, it's so nice to be able to just pull out a chunk of that dough, either from the fridge, or maybe you put some in your freezer and make a fresh loaf without all of the waiting and prepping and feeding. None of that. You don't have to do all of that in order to have fresh bread throughout the week. And if you love this recipe, you love following along, grab our cookbook. Our cookbook gives you 6 full menus, and it tells more of the story of how we started hosting dinners at our own kitchen table and how those dinners have turned into the most beautiful community dinners that we call freedom dinners. And the freedom dinners fight human trafficking in such a cool way. And guess what? When you watch any of our videos here on YouTube, you are helping us fight human trafficking too. You cooking with me is giving freedom. We donate 10% of all of our profits back to Atlas Free. And we're so glad that we can use our kitchen and our everyday life to give freedom.